Scotland's first railway was built to run between coal pits at Tranent and salt pans on the East Lothian Coast at Cockenzie. Salt has been produced in this part of Scotland since the Middle Ages, and in 1630, the Earl of Winton established 12 salt pans at Cockenzie. The Earl, however, supported the Jacobite Rebellion of 1715, and as a result, in 1719, his lands were seized by the British Crown. They were acquired by the York Buildings Company of London, and it was they who developed the pits at Tranent and built the 2.5-mile Waggonway to Cockenzie. Work began 300 years ago in May 1722 by local wright William Dixon. The entire Waggonway was wooden, with wooden rails laid to a gauge of 3 feet 3 inches, on a corduroy of timbers to provide a foundation, and extra long timbers acted as stabilisers. The line was built on a falling gradient from Tranent to Cockenzie and along the coast to Port Seaton, so that loaded wagons ran downhill by gravity, and the empties were pulled back up by horses. Each wagon carried 2 tons of coal, and the horses were expected to make 3 round trips per day. Wooden waggonways didn't have a life expectancy much above 10 years, and a second, much more substantial waggonway was built directly on top of the first, but to a wider gauge of 4 feet in 1728 to 1730. This was when the Waggonway, salt pans and pits were under the lease of renowned architect and entrepreneur William Adam. The surface between the wooden rails was packed with cobbles and topped with dumps of small coal and industrial waste, including glass from the Port Seaton Glassworks, another of Adam's ventures. This provided a hard surface for the horses to walk on, and a footway was provided on either side for the driver who led the horses. A third face, also 4-foot gauge, was built 1743 to 1744, and it was this railway which was fought across during the Battle of Prestonpans on the 20th of September 1745. We'll let Alan Braby from the 1722 Waggonway Project take over the story.
So what we've got here in front of us, the 1722 one, constructed by William Dixon. We've got his diaries, we know that. William Dixon and Mann were working on this for years, and we've actually for the first time got a tangible bit of evidence for that. This bit of wood that survives in the bottom was cut by William Dixon in 1722 or 1723. So for the first waggonway, what they've done is just laid this parallel series of logs, basically half round. You can see the curve of the wood there. They've just halved them, put them in the ground. Every so often, we presume, we've only got one of them, but every so often we presume the sleepers are longer. So this one comes out through here, and we got it in our trench last year, but didn't fully understand what it was. With hindsight, it's now a long sort of stabilising sleeper. So you've got this corduroy road effect going all the way from the pits to the salt pans. On top of that, they then add the rails. So believe it or not, that's mineralised wood coming through here, and the soft core material is dried out a bit, so it doesn't show very well, but trust me, that's the remains of a rail. The other rail would be just on side. The archaeological evidence seems to be telling us that there was nothing between them, and when the horses were pulling the wagons back up, they were basically walking on what is described as an oak surface. I mean, these are presumably oak beams. You know, a period after that, it becomes so rickety and unstable, they completely replace it. The gauge is quite narrow, that's 3'3". They enlarge the gauge, and one sleeper beam is put in there, another sleeper beam is put in there, and then between it, they ram in these large cobbles. So that's the foundation between the rails. We know now that there are, from some evidence we've got down here, other sleepers coming through underneath, so tying them together. Then they put the actual rails on, and then they fill it full of the smaller cobbles. It's got bits of glass, slag and everything, and that's the working surface. So that's the phase 2 railway. Phase 3, again, that goes completely, it gets rotten, it gets wobbly, they replace it again. Put the rails back in the same position, and this hard, compact, small coal stuff is dumped in, and then we've got evidence of the tie sleepers coming through here and here. So we've left that in situ. This is one of the rail lines coming down here, and you can see the small, compact cobble surface put on. These voids you've got here indicate that there's a rotten sleeper underneath here, and as we come further north, this thing here, which doesn't look like much, but that's a mineralized timber running from about here through to there. So the outside is mineralized and the inside is rotten away, much as it has in that one and that one there. Brilliantly, which is absolutely a brilliant bit of survival, and fortuitous, we have mineralized wood coming through here. This reddy brown stuff, absolutely solid. So that's the sleeper beam or the rail for the middle phase of Waggonway, and then we have a joint coming through here, joined to the sleeper. So having that evidence of where the sleeper and the rail ties together is amazing. Presumably it's like a lap joint or a tenon or something with a wooden pin put through it to hold it in place. And then, beginning of the 19th century, it's all urbanized, not urbanized, industrialized even more, and they put in these low walls. This all gets filled in, and the iron waggonway is set on top.
Being the first railway in Scotland, the Tranent Cockenzie Waggonway also had another first. On the 29th of August 1762, the 11-year-old James Patterson became the first person to lose their life in a railway accident in Scotland. The miners and salt workers were held in bondage, a form of serfdom which prevented them from leaving their jobs. But this was abolished in 1779 when the collieries, salt pans and waggonways were sold to the influential Cadell family. The Cadells carried out major rebuilding of the waggonway in 1815 when it was modernised. The wooden rails and sleepers were replaced by cast iron fish belly rails laid on stone blocks, and the gauge was altered again, this time back to the original 3 feet 3 inches. In 1833, the famous Scottish civil engineer Robert Stephenson, not to be confused with the English namesake although he has a different spelling, reconstructed the harbour at Cockenzie, including much of the waggonway at the town end. In 1849, the North British Railway opened a standard gauge steam-worked branch line to Tranent, and the Cadells arranged for transshipment from their narrow gauge line to standard gauge wagons at Meadow Mill. The section of line north from Meadow Mill to Cockenzie, however, soon fell into disuse, but the southern section from the main line at Meadow Mill to the Tranent collieries continued as a narrow gauge horse-worked railway until about 1896. Then it was relayed to standard gauge and worked by steam locomotives, remaining in use until 1959. In fact, a section of this ancient and honourable line was used by the National Coal Board as sidings until the 1960s. This means that the Tranent to Cockenzie Waggonway had a working life of 240 years. If you want to find out more about the Tranent to Cockenzie Waggonway, check out the 1722Waggonway project online and on their excellent social media. And if you ever find yourself in Cockenzie, visit their museum and heritage centre to learn more about Scotland's first railway. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, please like, share and subscribe. And I would especially like to thank my friends Alan Braby and Ed Bethune of the 1722 Waggonway project for their invitation to take part in the amazing archaeology of the Waggonway and the ceremonies to mark the 300th anniversary of Scottish Railways on the 7th of May this year. And I look forward to seeing you all next time on Rail Story.